Hello everyone, welcome back. So far we have installed everything manually. We SSH'd into the server, we installed packages using apt-get install. We wrote our configuration using our text editors on the live server itself, and we made the changes in the server there itself. Basically we did everything by hand, and that was fine if we had just one or two servers, right? Well, what happens if you have 5 servers or 10 servers or 100 servers? Going into each and every one of those servers and editing them manually or installing the packages manually is not going to work if you have 100 servers. And what if someone accidentally deleted a config file? This could also cause a lot of problems. So this is where configuration management tools come into picture. Before we talk about configuration management itself, let's take a moment to talk about infrastructure. What is an infrastructure? Well, an infrastructure means a bunch of systems working together to do something. So if we go back to our mini infrastructure from the previous video, so this is an infrastructure. This has so many servers working together, right? So for any organization, they will have some sort of infrastructure to run their applications, their websites, their APIs, their databases, etc. So when we say infrastructure, that's what we mean. From infrastructure comes the term infrastructure as code. Here, this is the important part, code. Basically what it means is we write down instructions telling how our infrastructure should look, and then a tool will make sure that it looks exactly like what we want it to look like. So let's say this is our server. This is a Debian 10 server, right? So what all does it have? It has, from our previous videos, it has Nginx, it has Node.js, and it has a MySQL server and some other config files. So infrastructure as code means we can convert this into a representation in code, something like install these packages, Nginx, install these packages like Nginx, MySQL, Node.js, and then copy these files like nginx.conf or let's say etc site.com or something like that. We have a code here that explains the desired state of this server. We want the Nginx package to be installed, we want the MySQL package to be installed, we want the Node.js package to be installed, and we want this nginx.conf and this site.conf to be copied over to the system. And this is what infrastructure as code means. There are so many different tools that will let us describe or write down our infrastructure like this. So I just made it up. Nothing is going to work if you just write it down like this. But it's kind of close enough to how Ansible does it. So configuration management and infrastructure as code. So this is where we talk about configuration management tools. There are so many different configuration management tools such as Chef, Puppet, and Ansible, etc. Different organizations will use different tools. In my current organization, we use all three in different projects and different parts of the infrastructure. So you don't really have to learn all of them. The idea is that you understand how these tools work, and then you can just learn the syntax of each of these tools in their own languages when you need them. So for beginners or for someone who have never worked on any of these configuration management tools, Ansible is the best option to get started. There are a lot of reasons why I would pick Ansible, and the most important and the only reason that you should know is it's easy. It's easy to write, it's easy to apply, and it's easy to manage. For tools like Chef or Puppet, there will be a Chef or Puppet master server that has all the configurations, like which server should have what configuration applied. If we have a web server here, we define in our Chef or Puppet master server that this web server should have these many things installed and these many config files in place, and there is an agent running on this web server that will apply this configuration and make sure that the config files and the packages stays the same. So there is an agent here. But in case of Ansible, there is no such agent. If you have a server here, You can directly run Ansible from the same machine, or you can run Ansible from a local machine, or you can have a dedicated server just to run Ansible commands from. Ansible uses SSH to connect to the target machine and configure it. So it's that simple to use Ansible, and Ansible uses the configuration language of YAML, and it's almost as readable as English. So that is why we're going to be using Ansible here. So again, just to reiterate, what is the problem we are trying to solve? We don't want to install packages manually on hundreds of different servers. We don't want to copy or write configuration files manually on the server. And we want to make sure that nobody accidentally removes a package, or nobody accidentally removes a config file or makes a change that is destructive, etc. So for now, let's just focus on these things. And that's enough intro about Ansible. Let's get started right away. Okay, so we need to get familiar with a few terminologies in Ansible. The first one would be the inventory files. And this is where you store all your servers, information about all your servers. For example, okay, I'm in this directory called DevOps, Ansible, and intro. And let me go ahead and create a new inventory file called inventory. So an inventory file usually looks something like this. Let's say web servers. So this is called a group, and then all the servers that belongs to that group. This is like the address of these servers. Let's say, for example, something like app1 devops.local, app2.devops.local. And if you have, let's say, DB servers, we can call it like db1.devops.local, db2.devops.local. So long story short, an inventory file is where you keep list of all your servers. And another term is modules. So these are like the pluggable pieces of code that does one thing. One example would be apt module. So this module is used to install and manage packages in a Debian system. We will come across all of them really soon, but I'm just giving you an overview of all the terminologies that we will be coming across. And another one is task. So this is where we define what action Ansible should do. And then there is Playbook. So Playbook contains all the instructions that is usually applicable to a host or a machine. Ansible docs have this definition that they have written there. If Ansible modules are the tools in your workshop, playbooks are your instruction manuals, and inventory of hosts are your raw material, which makes sense because inventory of hosts are like the plain machines without any configuration that are ready to get new configuration applied. And the playbooks are your instruction manual. The playbooks tells what needs to be done, and the tools would be the modules. Like we use apt to install packages, then we will use file to copy files, etc. So another one would be roles. So roles helps us have a role. For example, if you want to assign a role of a web server, you can have a bunch of different tasks that will get executed on a role. That would include, like, you may want to install Nginx package, then copy a configuration file, etc. I think for now this should be enough. We will explain in detail as we need them. Alright, so let's go ahead and install Ansible. So as I mentioned in my previous videos, I'm using Windows WSL, which is Windows subsystem for Linux. So I would strongly recommend that you install WSL if you are using a Windows machine. If you're using a Linux machine, that's all the best. Actually, if you can use a Linux machine, I would strongly advise that you start using one and get familiar with all the commands and all. That would just help you with the normal DevOps stuff itself. And it's a lot easier to have all the development tools in a Linux machine than to have it in a Windows machine. Here I'm using Windows for reasons like my NVIDIA graphics card does not work well with Linux. Alright, so let's go ahead and install Ansible. So I just googled install Ansible, and that will take us to the official documentation of Ansible. Depending on the operating system that you are using, you can find the correct installation instructions in this page. So I'm using an Ubuntu remember I'm using a WSL2 here, so this is an Ubuntu machine, Ubuntu 20.04. So I can follow the Ubuntu instructions. I'm just gonna execute them one by one. So first we will do sudo apt update so that it updates the index, and then we will install another package, software properties common, and then I need to add the Ansible's repository. So what it does is, I'll show you what it does. So if you go into etc apt and sources.list.t, you can see that it has added a new file for Ansible, which has the repository URL for Ansible. If you remember, we talked about all of these things in one of the older videos. Alright, so next we just install Ansible. Again, remember, I'm installing this locally on my local machine. This is not my Debian virtual machine, this is my WSL machine. Okay, so Ansible is installed. Let's go ahead and launch my Debian virtual machine. So I'm gonna try and log into my Debian virtual machine via SSH. Yeah, so I'm in the Debian virtual machine. So we can see that the IP address is 192.168.0.110. Alright, so let me just edit the inventory file, and I'm just going to delete all these entries. And I'm just going to add a new entry called, I don't know, DevOps. And I'm just going to add the, 192.168.0.110. Okay, so let's see what Ansible can do for us. So I'm just going to do Ansible-I and then the inventory file and the group name. We added the group name as DevOps for the machine that we are trying to interact with, DevOps. And then we're going to use the M for a module, and we're going to use the module ping, and then U for which user you want to log into this machine as. So if you remember, I logged into this machine as the Mansoor user, so I'm just gonna use that and enter. Alright, so here you can see that it says success. So we did the ping and we got a pong as the response, and it says that it discovered a Python interpreter at userbin Python. So what it means is our Ansible installation is fine and our Debian machine can be configured with Ansible via SSH. Now, as I mentioned before, Ansible is agentless. You don't need to install anything on the target machine. In this case, this is our target machine. But this is fine for 99% of the machines. You just need to have a Python interpreter installed there. But for machines that does not have Python, this may not work. Actually, this will not work. So what did we do? We just installed Ansible locally and we just did a Ansible command to ping our server. And that's it. We did not do anything else. So this is not very useful, right? Okay, let's do something useful. There is another module called command, which lets us run a command on the target machine. And we use the -a, which means the argument for the to be executed on the machine. So let's say I'm gonna execute the command hostname, and let's see what happens there. So we can see that it replied with the hostname of the target machine, which is Debian. So let's say if you want to see df-h, which will look for the disk usage, we can see that it came with a response. So how is this useful? Well, it's not very useful in this case. That is because we only have a single server here, right? What if we had like 100 or 1,000 servers here? Using Ansible like this is called ad hoc usage. Ad hoc usage is very useful when you want to quickly run a command on a bunch of servers. For example, if you want to see the disk usage on like 100 different servers, you can do this using Ansible, and this is called Ansible ad hoc command. All you have to do is you have to edit your inventory file and add all the machines that you want to run this command in here, and you just use the group name and you do Ansible-i inventory, then the group name and then the module. In this case we are using the command module, and then -a, and then you type in the command, and then -u, and then the user itself. Remember, this user means the user that you're logging into the server as. And Ansible by default, if you don't specify any module, by default it uses the command module, so you can just run it without that and it will have the same effect. Alright, so let's go ahead and write our first playbook. So I'm gonna create a new file called playbook.yaml. Ansible uses YAML, and this is the syntax of YAML. You have to start the first line with 3 dashes. Then you give it a name. You're giving the name to this playbook. So what do we want to do? Let's actually set our goal straight first. Okay, let's say we want to install Nginx, and we want to make sure that Nginx is running, and we want to copy a configuration file from our local machine. And let's also copy the index file. Okay, so we have our list of things that needs to be done using Ansible. Usually what we do, we log into the server, we install it by hand. We do apt-get install, then we copy the config file and we copy the index file, etc. But now we're going to do this using Ansible. So let's just name this as configure Nginx. So the next thing that we need to do is hosts. This means in which hosts this should apply to. So in this case we have only one host, and that has a group name DevOps. So I'm just gonna give DevOps. And the next one is become. So this means to become the root user. So if you remember, we use the Mansoor user here, not the root user. But this user by default does not have permission to install packages, right? You need to do sudo to be able to install packages. So we use become yes, so that the user can actually become the root user before installing the packages. And now we have to define all our tasks. Remember, this is the playbook itself, and the playbook contains all the tasks that needs to be done on the server. So we give tasks. So again name. So this is our first task. So we want to install Nginx. So we will give the name as install Nginx. Okay, so now we need to install Nginx, right? So which module lets us install packages? That would be the apt module. So if you don't know this, you can simply Google install packages in Ansible, and then it will come up with the module name. So this goes for anything. Like if you want to copy files, there will be a files module, etc. The next thing that we need to do is we need to give name, and in our case it's Nginx, because we want to install the Nginx package. And the next thing is state. So this means this is the state of the package that it should be. So there are different values to this, and when we give latest, it means Ansible will make sure that always this package stays the latest version. Alright, so let's go ahead and try this one. If you go to Ansible's documentation and search for the apt module, you can see that the state, this one, have these many values: absent, build dep, latest, and fixed, and present. So you can read what all of this means in here. So for now we are only interested in this one, latest, which means ensures that the latest version is installed. Okay, so let's save this, and let's see what happens if we run it. So we use the command Ansible playbook for that. So before we run the playbook, let's look for any syntax error. So you do that by using Ansible playbook -- syntax -check and then the playbook name. Alright, so yeah, obviously we have a syntax error. So let's check what happened. Yeah, I missed an S there. So let's run that again. Yeah, all good. So let's go ahead and run this. So you do that using Ansible Playbook -i and then our inventory file and then the playbook file. Alright, so we got another error. It says missing sudo password. That is because I said become yes, but I did not provide any password here, right? Let's open our inventory file and we need to mention which user that it should use to log into the server. That would be Ansible user equals Mansoor. Also, in addition to that, we need to pass a command line argument, that is Ansible Playbook -i, then the inventory file and then the playbook file, and then we need to pass a -k. That means to ask for the password. So if I enter that, it will ask for the password for my user so that it can run commands as sudo. So I will enter the password for this user here. And if I do that, alright, it says the host here, OK equals to, change this 0 and no other errors. So this is 0 because I already have Nginx installed. So let me go ahead and remove it. Okay, so I removed Nginx and let's run this again. And this time we can see that it said changed equals 1. So it was able to install Nginx. You may be thinking like, why did it install it so fast, right? That is because even though we removed the package here, the downloaded Debian file is already in the cache. So all it has to do is just simply install the package. It doesn't have to download it again. Alright, so we have our package installed. So what's the next thing that we need to do? We need to make sure that Nginx is running. Let's open our playbook again. So that would be another task, right? So make sure to indent it properly. So the next task would be make sure Nginx is running. And then we need to use the module called service because we are dealing with the service here. The name would be Nginx and we need to enable the service. So we give enabled is true. So this means the service will be enabled on boot, and then the state, it should be started. So we can take a look at what are the available states. We just have to go to Ansible service module and then go ahead and look at this state here. Okay, so we have the option of reloaded, restarted, started and stopped. So right now we are interested in the started, which means to make sure that the service is running. Alright, so let's go ahead and try that out. So we'll do the same command, enter the password. Alright, so nothing changed because probably Nginx was already running. So let me just stop Nginx. Let me just make sure that Nginx is not running. It's not. Here you can see that it changed equals 1. So that means it started Nginx pack. So far so good. So the only thing that's left is to copy the config file and the index.html file. Alright, so let's go ahead and create a directory called files. So this is where we're going to keep all the files. And now we're going to create a file. Let's name it like learnansible.com or something like that. This is like a random name that I'm giving. This should have, so again we are trying to copy the Nginx config to the server. So I'm just going to give like server listen port number 80, server name, I don't know, learndevops.com or something. I don't even know this domain name. And let's say root would be var www. All right. Okay, I have a different name here and a different name there. It's fine, doesn't matter. Let's go ahead and edit the playbook again. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to copy the config. So we're going to name the task as copy config, and we're going to use the module called copy. The source would be, what was the file name? I forgot. So we can, while in Vim, you can run commands like this. Okay, so the file name was learn-ansible.com. Let me just copy it. So source would be that, and destination would be etc nginx sites enabled and this. All right, so let's run that. All right, so it copied the file. Let's go ahead and take a look if the file has been copied. Indeed. All right, so this is the basic, this is the introduction, and that's it for this video. In the next one onwards, we're going to be using Ansible everywhere, and we're going to be learning a lot more than this. We're going to be doing a lot more advanced stuff using Ansible, like templating, things like that. So this is it for now. See you in the next one.